Welcome back to the Couples Edition with Allie and Ely.
Hey everyone. This episode, we'll be talking about how we quit our jobs to be full-time travelers, what we learned, why we did it, and how it impacted our relationship. What a crazy adventure, but since it was your idea, why don't you tell us why we did it?
It was my idea. However, in fairness, I just found a reel we made right before we did it where we were joking about doing it. And I think it all happened because right after we got married, we went on a month-long European adventure over the holidays.
Yeah.
We both had 2 weeks PTO for Christmas.
Awesome.
And so 2 weeks paid leave. Both of our companies shut down at Christmas.
Yeah.
And so we were like, what if we added 2 weeks of PTO and we just traveled for a month?
Oh, man.
And it was the best experience. And that was a month into marriage.
It's cold, though.
Christmas in Eastern Europe is freezing, so you definitely have to be prepared. But I think that experience, we just fell even more in love with travel than we already did. And if you remember from episode 1, we talked about how a non-negotiable for both of us was somebody who really wanted to travel.
Yeah.
And so after, I think, just kicking off our marriage with travel, then we started traveling a lot.
Yeah.
Once we got married, I think we were traveling at
Every
least
week.
1 or 2 weekends a month at least. And then a few months later, we did almost a month living in Mexico City.
Yeah, oh, that was fun.
And I feel like it was at that point when we started saying, what if we did this full time?
Yeah.
Like, what if we got rid of our apartment in San Francisco and just started traveling full time? Because we were both working fully remote. We didn't have to go into the office. So I think after living in Mexico City for almost a month, we started to really talk about and joke about, because I posted a reel while we were living there of us laying on the beach saying something like, what if we quit our jobs and did this full time? And then a few months later we did.
But I remember it wasn't just a few months. We went to Reading to see your family. And on the drive back, you were upset and you were crying because you were dreading going back to work on Monday.
I don't even remember that.
I remember that
I'm so
because
traumatized.
I was thinking during that car ride, like, oh my goodness, you should quit your job and do what you feel most passionate about. And I remember telling you that in the car, and you were like, yeah, I want to travel. I want to do more things, but we can't do those things. And I had just got the new job that was fully remote.
I don't even remember that actually, but I definitely could see that was happening. Something though, even though it was my idea eventually to do it, and I do remember coming to you saying like, hey, I think I want to quit my job.
Yeah.
What if we did this? Like, let's pray about it, see if we have peace about it. And I will say, even though it was my idea, I think you were the one who pushed it through because you're such a big risk taker.
Oh my goodness.
And you're always encouraging us to take bigger risks. And I think when you don't have dependencies yet, like kids or a mortgage,
way easier.
it is a good time to take a risk. And I love that you are such a big love and hate that you are such a big risk taker.
Yeah.
So you really encourage my crazy ideas. And
Thank you.
and you were fully on board. Once we decided to do it, there was no turning back, no questioning, no hesitation. We were fully on board. And then you started prepping not to quit your job and like the logistics.
Yeah, for me, it was pretty easy. You were doing a lot of the logistical work on getting out of the house.
Selling, yeah.
I was doing more of the logistical work on how do I work remotely digitally. So I was watching every YouTube video on setting up VPNs, what a VPN is, and how to travel remotely, following all these bloggers and forums on digital nomading to figure out how people work from laptops in Bali or coffee shops in Indonesia or in Vietnam. So I think for me, it was just figuring out, one, how do I change my address so I'm further away from the office at work?
That was so clutch that my brother lives a few cities over from us and let us use his address.
That was amazing.
This is so shady, but Ely has left this job now, so we can give all the tea.
We can tell. We can say. We
can finally spill all the tea.
Out.
There's been so many things during the whole almost 2 years of while we were traveling.
Oh, I've been holding
that
this
we
in
had
for
to be
too
so
long.
secret online. And now that you're done, we can literally share all the HR violations, taking your
Oh my
laptop
goodness.
abroad, using the hacks to get around your company's VPN.
So crazy.
The funniest one to me, though, which I didn't even know you did this until a few months into our travels, was that you had taken an empty screenshot of our old apartment.
Oh, yeah.
Of your background.
Yeah.
So you could use it as your virtual background.
And it was so real.
So people had no idea that you were literally in a different location every day.
No
like
one
a
questioned
different coffee shop.
I could be at a coffee shop in Madrid and people thought that I was home in San Francisco. It could be 8 p.m. in Athens, like working from a
with
loud
a lamp
bar.
on as if it was the sun.
It was crazy. And I also had this app where you could it mutes the sound around you. It silences everything.
Yeah.
So you could be at a loud bar late at night working in Athens and people think you're at home because your noise is quiet.
And the mouse jiggler. So when it was time for us to go to bed, but the office was still on, you could make it look like you were still on.
My mouse worked overtime. I used to put that mouse to work.
There were so many logistics, I feel like. For me, the biggest thing was I tried to get as much money out of our apartment as we could.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd sold all of our furniture. So I guess a little context. We literally sold everything that was irreplaceable. Yeah. So the only things we kept were like our Crate and Barrel wedding dishes because I would never rebuy those.
The things you don't want to rebuy.
The things you don't want to rebuy because we got such nice wedding stuff.
Yeah.
And like I personally would just never buy it.
Thank you for anyone that bought us wedding gifts.
Anyone who attended our wedding and supported our kitchen.
We'll have another episode on our wedding.
We didn't sell that stuff. We have all of it. But we sold all of our furniture. Yeah. We got rid of a ton of our clothes. Yeah. We just really went down to what was really important. So our wedding stuff, like my snowboard, maybe our extra clothes and shoes, put that into a storage unit,
all
got
the extra
rid of
clothes
our apartment.
And shoes you had.
I downsized a lot.
But you also had a ton.
Okay. But living out of a suitcase for 3 months at a time was such a challenge.
Sometimes it was less. Sometimes it was weeks at a time.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. In Athens, we were there for only about...
No, I mean, like, you would pack a suitcase for 3 or 4 months.
Oh, I see.
The first leg...
Yeah, you're right.
Day one, when we left, we had to pack for, I think, 5 different countries and 3 different climates. Yeah. Because when we started, we were in tropical Greece in September. So it was like summer.
Yeah.
And then we went to Lisbon, which was also really hot. Yeah. And then we went to fall in Paris. Yeah. And then we went to Costa Rica.
Oh, that's right. Costa Rica.
And then we swapped our clothes before going to London. That's right. So all that to say, like, one of the things about digital nomading is that you would have to plan for so many different climates, which was part of our strategy because we realized how difficult that was, like packing bikinis, but also pea coats and scarves.
Oh, man.
We had to start being more strategic about, okay, let's try to stick in one climate for 3 months so we don't have to like double pack our suitcases. Yeah. Do you also remember our first leg? We way overpacked. Remember how heavy our bags were that we had to buy a 4th bag? We
didn't overpack. Someone overpacked and it wasn't we. You overpacked.
But we are one.
No, not when it comes to packing. You carry your burden, I carry mine, and I'll see you across the pond.
Okay, that actually, I hate that.
Hate what?
Because I thought we had an agreement. I hate when you say that you carry your burden because I carry the family's burden of planning all the logistics and you just show up empty-handed. I have your passport. I have your plane boarding pass. I have all the details. Yeah. And you half the time don't even know where we're going. Okay. So I carry the family on our back logistically. The least you could do is carry my suitcase.
But that's not fair when you're not a very efficient packer. At least in the first leg.
That's not fair when I have to do all the hours of travel planning and booking.
I do a little bit of it.
You helped with a little bit of research.
But when you pack like 10, 15 pairs of shoes.
I did not
pack obsessive.
10, 15 pairs of
when you pack 300 t-shirts and 80 hats.
Okay, now we're being dramatic.
That's obsessive. Anyways.
So we've established that I overpacked, but I do think I got better as the months went on and we had to do it more and more.
We both got better.
So what we tried to do was schedule our trips in what we called legs. Yeah. So we spent a lot, if not the majority of our travels in Europe just because the time zone was so convenient.
More gracious.
And the cost in Western Europe was really easy. Yeah. So the cool thing about Western Europe when you're working California hours is that it's either 8 or 9 hours ahead, depending on what country you're in, which means you essentially start your California workday at 2 p.m. ish,
Yeah.
and then you finish around 10. So you get this whole first half of your day to explore and go to the gym and do all the things, which I think is one of the reasons we loved Europe. But what was interesting about the EU is that within the Schengen area, and if you don't know what the Schengen area is and you plan to digital nomad, you need to research it because there's very strict rules that you can only be within the Schengen area, which is the majority of European countries, for 90 days or 3 months out of every 6.
And then you got to go.
And then you got to go. So if you spend a full 90 days within the Schengen area, you then need to leave for 90 days.
Yeah.
So we would stay in the Schengen area in Europe for 90 days. And then we did the UK since they left the EU.
That was cool.
That was a clutch. And then every 3 to 5 months, we would stop back in San Francisco for a few weeks. We would go to our storage unit.
Yeah.
We'd swap out all of our clothes for the next season, the next run.
Yeah.
And we'd stay in an apartment here for, maybe a month at a time, go visit the dentist, do all that logistical stuff, and then leave.
Yeah.
For you, what do you think was some of the most interesting things about nomading?
I think some of the most interesting things all centered around culture. For example, work culture is just completely different in Europe. In the US, you can go to a Starbucks or you can go to any cafe and people just work there from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day of the week. Cafes are like the new offices in the US.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. In Europe, first of all, the cafe culture there is amazing. And the reason why it's amazing is because they don't allow just everyone to just work at a cafe for as long as you want.
Yeah.
Especially on Fridays through Sundays, you can't work at a cafe because it's used for social hours.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing is working culture in Europe is different. How people kind of behave in that setting is different. But also social culture as well too. In the US, what you'll notice is when people want to hang out with their friends, you're having to schedule things weeks in advance, months in advance, to hang out, and they become these big calendar activities. But what we saw that would happen a lot in Europe is people would just hang out together. People would just find each other and hang out, show up to someone's doorstep, knock on the door,
same day,
come out and hang out. And it just seemed very, very easy to have a social life.
Yeah.
And so I would say, I think the culture was that culture in terms of socializing is definitely a lot different from how Americans do it or how we do it in the US.
That's so true. I forgot about that. We would go out on a Tuesday night to our neighborhood park, and there were so many young people out and about having dinner. It was so different than what it's like here. And I think a lot of the people we met too said oh yeah, you just call up a friend that day and say, want to hang out. Whereas in the US, I feel like some of our friends were scheduling a month out to hang out or grab dinner.
Yeah.
But also with the cafe culture, do you remember that there were only certain tables you could use a laptop?
Oh yeah.
Designated
Not
laptop
every
tables.
table
And if they were full, you couldn't work there.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
I know. And that hurt me oftentimes because I'd go out to work
on the
and
weekends.
I'd find out there weren't any tables available.
Yeah.
So I'd have to either go home or I couldn't work that day because there wasn't any space to work from. Out of all the places that we've been, which one was your favorite?
Oh, I love this question. I always answer whenever people ask this, I say I have a favorite one that we lived in and a favorite one that we visited.
That's true.
Because while we were living in a city, we would sometimes take weekend trips and go visit another city.
Totally.
My favorite city that we lived in was hands down Lisbon, Portugal.
Oh, so amazing.
It is a sister city to San Francisco in so many ways, with the hills, the bridge, the colors, the architecture, and just the energy.
Oh man.
I feel like
people.
Yeah, Lisbon has such a similar vibrant energy that San Francisco has, and it's even more diverse.
Yeah.
Which was just so awesome all around. I could easily live there long term. And our favorite city that we visited, I think, was Marrakesh, Morocco.
Oh, okay, interesting.
The architecture, the food.
Oh, so you're right.
It was so
that
beautiful.
Was really awesome.
There was so much to see and explore.
Very unique.
Yeah. What about you?
I really enjoyed Hanoi.
Oh,
that was
Hanoi.
Hanoi.
Vietnam. Yeah.
Vietnam. That was awesome.
That was very unique.
That was really awesome. I also really enjoyed Singapore. I always love Singapore. That's just incredible. Singapore.
Classic.
Invite me back, Singapore. Just invite me to come. Another city that was also really awesome was Madrid. Madrid was just a really great, bustling Spanish city.
Minus the racism.
Yes, and minus they also expected you to know when all the Easter activities.
Oh my gosh.
On social media,
I
you
forgot
got
about that.
a lot of backlash.
Oh yeah.
For not knowing.
I had a viral video. We landed in Madrid during Holy Week, and I had never even heard of Holy Week before.
Yeah,
Had you?
I have.
I had never even heard of
Only
it.
because Notre Dame and all the Catholic schools play together.
Yeah.
And it becomes a thing.
I think we had landed in Madrid at like 4 p.m. We dropped our stuff off, changed, because God forbid you wear athleisure in Europe, you American. And we went to dinner, and I remember sitting at dinner near the window. We saw this parade of white hoods marching, and we were like...
Is that the KKK?
I mean, we obviously knew it wasn't the KKK, right?
Well, I don't know. Do they move to Europe? do they have...
Do they have a European branch?
Yeah.
I definitely remember being paused.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? And I went outside to go investigate. And that was when we started Googling, like, what do these white hoods mean? And that was when we learned they actually come in many other colors.
That's
like
crazy.
Later that week, we saw purple hoods.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's
of course,
right.
there's so much beauty and symbolism in the Catholic culture associated with it. We just hadn't, in America, we hadn't had that experience.
Yeah.
Or seen photos of it. And so I posted a video of it online, and everybody was like, I can't believe you didn't research the culture of the country you were visiting. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, like, if only people knew how much work goes in to full-time travel, because you're constantly planning the next thing, researching Airbnbs, flights, trying to find affordable options. You literally don't have time to even, I honestly didn't even know Easter was that week.
Yeah.
You just don't have time to research like religious traditional outfits.
Exactly.
But man, we
every
got
detail of a
so much
society.
hate on that video.
I know.
Europeans calling us all as Americans stupid.
I know. And you were representing the Americans that
Sorry,
Easter
guys.
weekend. Sorry. One of my really interesting experiences about Europe about living as a full-time traveler was feeling so small, knowing that there is so much life happening outside of yourself. Because it's easy to get stuck into your own mind and stuck into your own brain about what's happening in your life, in your world. But when you travel so much, you are constantly reminded that things are moving and breathing around you just continuously, and it has nothing to do with you. The world isn't centered around you. Not that I ever thought that it did.
That's what all the Europeans said in the comment on that viral video. The world doesn't revolve around you Americans.
Well, I learned that traveling. Because you feel so small. You're reminded that like there are things happening in all these amazing big cities, and whatever might be going on the news on your phone, that is just a fraction of what's happening in the world. So it was kind of a really good feeling, but also a really big eye-opener.
Yeah, that's so true. I think having the opportunity for both of us, even before this digital nomad experience, we had both lived in other countries.
Yeah.
I think every country we've lived in, whether it was for a few weeks or a few months, getting to experience another culture and take away the highlights that we liked, and also be curious about the things that we didn't like, and kind of take that in to form even attributes that we want to bring home with us to our family culture.
Exactly. Yeah, being open-minded. That's awesome.
I think everybody, when they become an adult, needs to leave their home country and go stay a month. Either traveling around or just in one country that is completely opposite.
That should be an adult requirement.
Yes. Even like maybe before you do college, take a gap year, go backpack around Asia, Europe, South America, because it just opens your mind to so many things that about the world and other cultures that when you don't travel, you miss so much of that, and you just normalize the bubble or the culture that you grew up in, even though it doesn't have to be like that, and you just don't know.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think that would help any human expand their horizon on things happening outside of themselves. Get out of your head.
Yeah. With all that, what do you think were the biggest challenges that we faced while traveling full time?
For me, I'd probably say connecting with my friends in the US because of time zone differences.
Yeah.
So you're always having to set up these Zoom calls or FaceTime calls to catch up with friends. And for me, sometimes it's like 12 a.m. For them, it might be 6 a.m. just to catch up. I think that was really tough. Another thing that was really tough was being able to share this experience so publicly and openly, because I had to be secretive about it for my work. Yeah. I couldn't let anyone know that I was living across the pond in various countries while working for an American company. That was, a tough one for sure. But also just moving around and always having to set up. And you get to a new city, you have to find a new grocery store, a new gym, a new routine, a new main street, all these different things that you have to set up. It just constantly having to rewire your brain in a new environment What about you?
Yeah, that last thing you just mentioned for me was the most difficult. Is every time we moved, having to find a new gym, and how far away is the gym? So how does that change your timing in the morning?
Yeah.
And definitely the hardest part, I think, on that note, was grocery shopping.
Oh,
because grocery
talk about
stores
that.
in different countries, they have different, local fruits and local
Yeah.
vegetables, or just things that are more normal to that culture to eat that like we might not know how to cook.
Yeah.
So I just remember going to grocery stores and trying to look for what I would normally buy in the US, like
Yeah.
maybe broccoli and cauliflower
Not
or
that
something,
easy.
and you don't see it in other countries.
Yeah.
Or you can't find it, or you don't know where to look, or is there like a specific vegetable store? Because I think in a lot of countries outside of the US, what we experienced is a lot of stores are smaller.
Much
Like
smaller.
there's a meat store, there's a wine store, an organic store,
Yeah.
a cheese store. Whereas in the US, you usually just go to one store to get everything.
Big grocery stores.
And I felt like that was a culture shock that took me a while to learn. Like, why doesn't the store have better meat options? And then I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you're supposed to go to the meat store.
Yeah.
That was really hard for me. And I felt like I just kept remaking the same food over and over again because I didn't know
Yeah.
what else I could cook. So that was really tough. But I think the mental toll of constantly finding a new routine, a new gym that had different equipment. And
Do you feel like you deal with change really well?
is that a targeted question?
Well, I'm just wondering. What I'm wondering from your perspective.
Yeah, from my perspective, I do.
Do you think you do?
Let me say it this way. I think I'm very adaptable. I think I can be a chameleon and fit in almost anywhere and kind of assimilate to what's happening around me.
Yeah.
However, mentally dealing with change, does it take me a while to acclimate, to get a good routine?
Yeah.
Yes. I think when we moved to Paris, we were there for about 3 months. This was at the very end of our travels.
Yeah.
I think it took me about a month to really feel like I had a good
Yeah.
flow going. But also at that point, we had been traveling for almost 2 years and we were a little tired. So I think it took longer.
Kinda got over it.
It just took longer to adjust, I think, the more we went on because we
Yeah.
were just getting travel tired.
Yeah.
Why, do you ask?
Oh no, just wondering.
Do you think I adapt well?
I think it's all relative. I think that sure you do adapt well. I think I welcome change really well because I'm just okay doing the work up front and getting it over with. I'm okay with let's just say we land to Paris and we're there for a month. I'm okay burning out the first 48 hours, figuring everything out in 48 hours, and then I can glide and soar. It seems like
I would
you
get overwhelmed.
would rather, take your time going through that process.
I don't think it's that I wanted to take my time. I remember feeling overwhelmed. So we just landed a new Airbnb in a new neighborhood. And even if it's a city we had been to before, because we went back, we went to Lisbon twice and we had been to Paris a dozen times.
Yeah.
Even if it was a city we were familiar with, you're still in a new neighborhood, a new apartment. You don't know where any of the local necessities are next to you, whether it's the grocery store or the gym, or if we needed a laundromat.
Yeah.
I would just get overwhelmed. Okay, I'm hungry, but I don't even know where the grocery store is yet. And I don't know what app they use for food delivery. Do they even have that? Will it be in English? Will I be able to download it with VPN on my phone? It would get really overwhelming, I think.
Yeah. It was interesting. I don't know if I know how to define the word overwhelm.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel
You just never get overwhelmed?
No.
So every time I get overwhelmed in the last almost 5 years, has it been 5 years? Yeah, 5 years that we've known each other, you're just like, what is happening?
Well, I let you deal with it, and I support it from a distance. But I guess, I've never felt the emotion of overwhelmingness because to me, it just seems like a long list of things to do, and I know I can't do them all, so I just do what I can, and then that's it.
Interesting.
That's it. I can't do it all. I guess it seems like you were worried about not being able to do it all. I am okay and comfortable knowing that I can't do it all.
I don't think that's how I see being overwhelmed.
No?
I think when I'm overwhelmed, I almost feel this cloud above me that's just weighted with all of these checklist items to do. I think getting overwhelmed, it's more of actually an emotional response because I know how to practically make a list and rank it based on priority and then strategically move through it.
Okay.
But I think sometimes when you're tired and you feel the weight of how much there is to do, you don't even want to make a list or look at it. You just want to take a nap. Something that might be a little surprising is that we never really got homesick.
No way.
If ever.
Homesick for what?
I mean, you mentioned earlier friends.
I thought you meant geographically homesick.
Yeah, no, I never really felt geographically homesick either. I actually think because I stayed in San Francisco during the pandemic when everybody left, getting away actually really helped me re-fall in love with the city after watching it suffer for so many years.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think I got homesick because I wasn't missing what it had become since the pandemic.
Yeah.
But then once we moved back, it was like this new love had awakened for the city because I had gotten to take a step away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never felt homesick for people. And I think it's because we were just having so many amazing experiences.
Yeah.
And it just felt like such a unique time in our life to do these bucket list things that we were so privileged to be able to do. I think the only time I felt homesick was there was one Christmas that we were in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
And I think all of my family was together in one place, including like my in-laws' parents. Like just everybody had gotten together and we were the only ones missing. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. And it was also...
I think we were in Paris, so, you know, it wasn't a terrible trade.
Well, no, we were in London and we also got sick.
That was a bad Christmas.
Yeah.
That was different,
That was rough.
But yeah, so we did spend all of our holidays traveling as well. We went back, I think, for one Thanksgiving, only because it like fit into just like the route we were going.
Yeah. Something else that was challenging for me was watching you go through emotional roller coasters. That was pretty sad. That was pretty tough because you were figuring out a lot of things. How to be your own boss.
Yeah.
How to set goals, how to have a routine, but also all the emotions around being in a new environment, in a new place, adjusting, planning, and creating content, all that stuff. You know, it was pretty tough and sad to see, but you grew a lot from that, though.
Yeah, I think all the transition happening all at once, quitting my job, we were still newlyweds. We'd only been married, I think, 8 months.
Yeah.
And then having to figure out how to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then because I was responsible for all of the planning and logistics.
Yeah.
It just felt like so much all at once. And I think after working in the corporate world for 7 years, then transitioning to being my own boss and figuring out even how to keep myself accountable on a daily routine, that was such an adjustment for me. And it definitely took me longer than I'd like to admit to get my feet under me. But even now, almost 3 years later, I'm like, it still is a roller coaster. And I think with entrepreneurship, I don't know if that ever ends. I don't know if it ever doesn't feel like a roller coaster because some days are really good and other days feel really bad. And like, should I quit? Should I give up? But I don't know. I'm really glad to have married somebody that is so supportive of me quitting my job, me becoming an entrepreneur, and even all the times I thought about quitting that you were like, no, you're not quitting. We're going to keep going until we figure it out. And then you quit.
And then I quit.
And now I get to be supportive and, you know, we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, it's amazing.
How do you think all of this season of traveling full time for almost 2 years impacted our relationship, given that we were newlyweds?
I think some goods where we got to explore and do a lot of awesome, unique things together. I mean, how many newly wedded couples do you hear leaving their entire home and exploring the world together?
Any couples, really.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So that was really awesome. I also think that we learned a lot about each other because we were adjusting in so many different ways, adjusting with life and career changes. That was really awesome. But we also did a lot of reflecting and had a lot of conversations about life and planning for life and where life would be. So we were constantly dreaming, which was really awesome because on one hand, we had to be present with what's exciting today, which was all the adventures. On the other hand, we had to think about what's going to be our future. What will it look like? How do we get there?
When does this end?
When does this end? Does it end?
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the good things for sure, some of the good outcomes for our relationship. What about you?
I think the best parts were just the memories we made. We have photos and videos. I actually love that I started really getting into content creation and documenting our life at the beginning of our travels.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Because we just have so many beautiful memories that were also documented that we can have forever and relive even when we're old and senile. We can go watch those videos of us at 26, 27 on ATVs in Greece or on that speedboat on the river in Lisbon.
It's Crazy times.
So many good memories, and I'm just so grateful that that was the foundation we started with, because it also allowed us to dream big, because we wanted to figure out how could we do something like this long term, not where we're digital nomading and living out of a suitcase, but how could we be not only bi-coastal but bi-global, where, you know, we're raising our family and our kids living in different countries and just traveling all the time and figuring out what type of life do we need to build to make that a reality.
Absolutely.
And I think that season of life really helped us dream even bigger together.
Yeah. As far as some of the challenges, I think the big one was our routine together, because we were working different hours. I was still working pretty much West Coast.
I tried to align with you.
You tried to, but that's the thing, is that we weren't able to always get it right. So we would have various mornings where I was a few hours ahead of you, or I'd stay up later because I was working later because West Coast hours were still kind of going and things got busy at work. That was definitely a challenge. Even like routine to like spend time together that was more quality versus just exploring was also challenging. Again, because we kind of had different paces going on for, you know, the early days of our travels, trying to figure things out. And I think we also fought a little bit more.
That's what I was going to say.
Than we would like to.
I don't think it was more than we would have had we lived at home.
No, I agree.
I think, but we were newlyweds, so we were still, as we mentioned last week, we were still learning how to fight.
What were some things we were fighting about?
Do you remember? I think our worst fight while traveling was in Barcelona.
Oh, I remember that.
We were at that restaurant seated outside for dinner.
That was a good restaurant.
I don't even remember it. I just remember cussing you out at the table and, like, you know, kind of looking at the tables next to us.
Yeah.
Like, are they hearing what's happening?
Yeah.
And then we were arguing on the street, and then you started to walk home without me. And I remember I was trying to follow you. And
is that what happened, or were you walking too slow? Because there's a difference there. Me
you
leaving you, or you
walking
too slow?
You were power walking, and I was trying to keep up with you because I didn't want to be left alone at night in a foreign city. We had a huge fight about that, and then we had multiple fights about it afterwards because I was so mad that you like tried to leave me.
We had multiple fights about the principle around
of leaving.
Not just of leaving, the principle around fighting and how to resolve things afterwards. Especially while traveling, because we were in a foreign city.
Yeah. We don't need to rehash all the details. However, I do think having memories of fighting abroad, especially in Paris towards the end.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe to jump ahead a little, one of the reasons we decided to stop nomading at a little bit after a year and a half in was we were living in Paris, and I think we were just so tired of all the movement. It's funny because when we first started out and we had planned our first leg, we were like, we're going to move every 2 weeks.
Oh, man.
In fact, we had lost money because we had booked Airbnbs in 2-week increments.
Yeah.
And after literally the first 2 weeks, we were like, this is not sustainable.
Canceled
so we had to cancel and like book things. So then we moved to, okay, we have to stay somewhere at least a month.
Yeah.
And then after that, it became at least 6 weeks.
I know.
And then by the time we finished full-time travel, it was 3 months.
Oh, yeah. We were doing
our last
stays.
leg was 3 months in Paris.
Yeah.
And by that point, I think we were tired. We were getting cranky. We were trying to do this real estate stuff.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of fighting about doing business together in real estate.
Just wasn't sustainable.
And it was just, I think we both got to a point where it was like, let's go home.
Yeah.
This has been great. But
we did miss home as well, too.
I think we got to a point where
I definitely got homesick. Not really homesick in the traditional definition, more so in the I want to speak with people that are in my space.
That's
like
true.
I want to hang out with more techies. I want to hang out with more entrepreneurs and more people in my space. And I miss that about home because that's the beauty about San Francisco.
Yeah.
Is a lot of those folks are here.
Yeah, that's true. I think our life had also started to change by that point where you were starting to build startups. And so you wanted to be closer to that community.
Yeah.
And then my job had been getting busier and busier now that I was adding in real estate stuff with our Airbnb. I couldn't spend as much time planning our travels because that was such a burden. And I think for other people who are thinking about digital nomading, I really recommend that people stay places at least a month.
Yeah.
Because just the constant planning of where you're going next once this Airbnb ends, it just never ends. It's like every single day you're planning a little bit more of what's ahead. And it was just such a time burden at a certain point. We both really wanted to put our heads down and work on the businesses we were building. The luxury of travel started to actually become a burden.
Yeah. Did it wear off or was it a burden?
I think it became a burden because it was so much work to keep traveling. And we both were trying to put so much work into businesses we were building.
Yeah.
that I felt like we no longer had the time capacity to prioritize traveling, because I think even towards the end we started exploring less and less. Because I remember feeling a guilt that when you're in a foreign city, even if you're living there, that you should be out exploring every day. And that gets old too, because some days you just want to spend a Saturday inside on the couch and have a chill low-key day, but because you're in some like beautiful foreign city, you just feel this pressure to constantly keep exploring. And I think towards the end we had like started exploring less and less, and we were just busy. And so it just didn't make as much sense to be abroad.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we didn't have any community in those locations. So we were always only together or alone. There's no in between. We didn't have friends where we could catch up with, grab coffee, grab a beer, go to a dinner. It was always you and I, or completely isolated because you were working on something or I was working on something, which again, as much as we enjoyed spending time together, community is really important whenever you're trying to call a place home.
Yeah, for sure.
And we didn't have that element, which was really important.
Every week we have a segment called Deep Dive Tea Time, where we ask a somewhat controversial tea gossip question and see what happens. So this week, in the vein of traveling, the question is it true you don't really know someone until you travel with them?
I think that you can travel with someone and go through highs and lows and experience so many amazing things or terrible things and still not fully know them, because traveling is an experience that takes a lot out of you, and I don't think that it defines who you actually are as a person. Some people are just bad travelers. They don't know how to pack. They don't know how to plan, how to think about time zones. So to fault someone or to point out some of those errors and say, oh, this person is not punctual, they aren't organized, well, that's a hard thing to get right if, one, you're not good at it naturally, but secondarily, you're doing it across the world. So I would say I don't think that traveling should dictate how well you know someone.
I completely agree. It almost makes me think of those reality TV shows like The Bachelor, where they're living almost in a fantasy world and it's not real life, and then they move back and do a week like in their hometown or something, and they see a completely different side of a person actually in their life and going to work, whatever. However, I do think you can learn a lot about somebody traveling, because I think traveling can induce stressful environments. And you see how people adapt and respond. Day one of digital nomading, so literally the day before, we had packed up our storage unit, turned in the keys to our apartment. It was time to fly to Europe. All of our flights got canceled that morning. You remember? There was a workers' strike. And we only had like a 2-day stop in Athens before flying to Greek islands. And we had ferries set up, like everything was already booked. And we were like, oh my gosh, if we get delayed a day, or what if it's 2 days, we're going to miss the whole, it was like a domino effect.
Chain reaction of terrible things.
While I did cry initially, I do think then it was like I had to kick into planning mode. And I remember my thought was like, let's just get on any flight to Europe and we'll figure it out from there. And so literally we got the last 2 seats on that flight to, I think, Frankfurt.
Oh,
and so we land in Frankfurt. We finally get internet again. And I remember we were in the customer service line for the airline. Like, we need to figure out a way to Athens. I'm on my laptop on top of my carry-on. Do you remember that?
I remember that.
I'll put the video up. I was looking up all the closest airports that had flights to Athens that were within train distance of Frankfurt. Like, okay, let's hop on a train and then fly. You might have learned a little bit about me in that process of like, we're going to figure it out. Like, just get us to the continent and we'll get there. But like, things like that happen in travel. Things get canceled, whether it's weather, a strike, or whatever. You have to move quickly. Maybe your luggage gets lost, and you have to be able to adapt. And so I think you can learn a lot about somebody, or even how they are when they get off a 16-hour flight or a red eye. I think it's very interesting what you learn. And I'm very thankful that we travel really well together. I feel like we have a good system and process that just kind of happened naturally. But I think a lot of couples, that's definitely something that I think before you get married, take a trip together. What do you think is one of the hardest truths that no one talks about related to full-time travel?
I think that would probably be this concept around being well received and accepted in different countries that you're in. For example, whenever you're in Lisbon, and let's just say you're an American traveling to Lisbon and you're working for an American company earning American dollars, there's a different financial and economic gap between you and the locals there. So you're able to participate in some of the luxuries that they probably can't, because American wages are higher and the cost of living in Lisbon is lower. And so you're able to eat out more and dine more and Uber more and do all these things. So I think like that's one aspect of it. And lastly, I think that people aren't as excited to see Americans because we carry this stereotype around being ill-educated about the world and society. And so people aren't always that thrilled about meeting and interacting and seeing Americans because they think that we're very, narcissistic and all we know is who we are. There's also this issue around Europe or different countries, different places in the world also have a racial issue as well. And so depending on where you're visiting, you may not be welcomed because of what race you are.
Yeah.
So as glamorous as it might seem, traveling across the pond, well, be careful. Depending on what race you are, you might not be accepted. Or again, I'm not saying you won't, nationally be accepted. I mean, just being there, it might not feel as welcoming because of how you look.
Yeah. Wow. You touched on so many good topics. The first one about, I forget the exact term for it, but essentially it's traveler gentrification, where you take American money and you go spend it in other economies where the dollar goes a lot further. And so they start raising prices. Like Lisbon has a huge issue where so many
locals,
where so many expats have moved in and are doing long stays in Lisbon and that they're pricing out locals.
And they're buying things.
Yeah, they're buying property, and that's a huge problem. And we don't have a great answer for it. Yeah. Because on one hand, tourism boosts local economies, but on the other hand, it prices locals out. Yeah. So it's a really complex issue that we tried to be mindful of while we were traveling. Yeah. But to a certain extent, I don't think we found or know what the right answer is to solve that problem. But also in related to race or how, we were received or looked at funny in Spain when older people would see us in the grocery store and just kind of stop and stare at us. Yeah. There's a reason there's a whole niche around Black travelers saying locations that they've traveled to that they feel safe or welcomed versus others, because it's a real thing. And I remember when we were in Portugal and we met that guy working at the coffee shop who was Brazilian, and he was explaining to us, I don't think either of us had thought about this.
No way.
That countries who have colonized other countries see the people from those colonized countries as less than, even though they share cultures oftentimes and they share language. Yeah. And so he was telling us his experience, like speaking Portuguese, but living in the colonizer country, being from a colonized country, and how he was treated differently, even though they're the same race. And I think coming from the US, where everything here is mostly based on race, going somewhere else and it's like, whoa, you guys are the same race, but you're treated differently simply just because you're from a country that hundreds of years ago this country colonized. Absolutely. And the locals here think they're somehow better for that. It's crazy, and just so many flaws of humanity and so much of that's really interesting to see while traveling.
Exactly. That's definitely a hard truth, is the cultural clashes you'll get, or the racial clashes you'll get as a traveler, and not being as welcome as you may think.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. The only other thing I would add is getting sick while you travel. Social media is often such a highlight reel that you don't see when you have food poisoning on a tropical remote island, or that time that I got a sinus infection in London. Oh, yeah. And then I had to go to the ER. They gave me antibiotics that then gave me a rash. So then I had to go back to the ER. And I think I had gone to the ER like 3 different times.
Oh, man.
And it's like the pain or even fear sometimes of being sick somewhere more remote where you don't have access. Like I was so fortunate in London. They have great free healthcare, but in other tropical places I've been in Asia where I've gotten really sick,
not that great.
It's really rough. And nobody talks about the toll even that traveling takes on your immune system.
Exactly.
Because you're constantly moving, you're not eating as healthy, your routine is off. Yeah. It definitely can take a toll. And I think I learned that one the hard way. So I think now that we're back, I'm so focused on health, primarily because of how much my body was impacted by all our travels.
I agree.
So in closing, what do you think are some of the key takeaways from our experience as full-time travelers, and maybe any advice or tips you would give to anybody considering doing something similar?
One, I would do this again. I think that you should absolutely, well, for me especially, I would do it again, but I think if we had different financial circumstances that allowed us to have different homes in different coasts, even if they're rented out, not, you don't have to own them and live them full time. But I think that would be a lot easier because then we could leave luggage and bags and things that mean a lot to us in different locations and still have access to them. Yeah. That's how I think I would do this again. That would be my, my answer around would I do this again? Yes, under that, lens. What about you?
I would do it again, to your point, if we had more money in the sense that we could still have a home base.
Yeah.
Because the only way it made sense for us was not having a home base, so we weren't paying 2 rents.
That's right.
I wouldn't want to live out of a storage unit again.
Yeah.
Having to unpack a storage unit and dig through boxes to find clothes for the next leg was so miserable, and those days were terrible. We would spend hours at our storage unit unpacking and repacking and just never having a home to go home to.
Absolutely.
You're constantly sitting on crappy Airbnb couches to watch movies, like IKEA couches.
So terrible.
Honestly, that's one of the things I love most about having a home again is like having a nice couch to just relax on.
That's so important.
It's so great. So I would do it again if we could do it in a somewhat more bougie way where we could still have a home and just travel at our leisure for months at a time.
What's your advice?
Who knows, we would. My advice to anybody who's considering doing something similar is travel slow.
Yeah.
And have a routine that you can implement in different cities.
Yeah.
So like for us, we would always start our day at the gym.
Yeah.
And then we would go on afternoon walks and we would find things to do to kind of maintain some sort of normalcy, even though we're constantly in a new city.
That's true.
And also just probably not stay anywhere less than a month unless you're hardcore backpacking and you're not working at all. Yeah. Because I think for us, that was a big part. We were working. That added a big element to it. Exactly. If you're not working at all and you're just living off savings or whatever, maybe you can travel faster.
Sure.
But then it takes a toll on your health and the planning. So my advice would be travel slow and budget wisely. Like our money went so much further abroad, which we talked about a little bit with the gentrification thing. But that was a huge benefit that even though we were now only living off one salary, we were still living a pretty good life because our money went a lot further.
Yeah. My advice would be if you want to travel and if you want to nomad, you should absolutely do it. You won't regret it. You won't regret it. You should follow that dream because there's so much that you'll learn. You'll learn about yourself. You'll learn about who you want to be. I think another piece of advice I'd give is don't bite off more than you can chew. So know yourself. Know what you can handle. Know what's best for you.
Definitely have to take care of yourself and what supports your mental health, your physical health, since that's so impactful.
I agree.
But do it. I personally think everybody should go live in another country for at least a month and get so immersed in another culture to really break off whatever box and bubble that you've grown up in and that you live in and let your mind expand in a way that you probably can't even imagine.
And tell us where you want to go. We'll give you advice. We'll share some tips.
Yeah, of all our favorite places. We did, I think, around 20 countries and like 40 cities.
Oh, man.
Thanks for watching. If you loved and enjoyed this episode, subscribe to see more content related to couples, some of our crazy life adventures, and big risks and decisions we've taken. Next week, you don't want to miss, so make sure you're subscribed because we're going to be talking very vulnerably and transparently about money, dollar bills. We're going to share about what that looked like as a couple transitioning into marriage. Did we merge our finances? How do we pay bills? How do we, now that we're both entrepreneurs, self-employed, what are we doing? Who's the sugar daddy mama? What's happening? So stay tuned. We hope you have a great week and we'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Bye.
We're out.